I never thought a simple celebration could change my life, or at least my entire workspace hierarchy. One moment, I was leaning over a counter, trying not to spill alien juice into my coffee cup. The next, a sharp nip on my shoulder and a low, satisfied voice murmuring, "Mine," had everyone else scattering faster than a fire alarm. At first I laughed. It was instinct. Human humor always kicks in when chaos strikes. But then I realized something weird was happening. Everyone in the lab was suddenly treating me like I had a literal force field, only with teeth. I glanced down at the mark, which didn't even hurt, and up at the alien scientist, who was smirking like she just solved quantum mechanics in her spare time. Her fangs retracted smoothly, luminescent saliva dripping faintly onto her uniform, and she tilted her head with a look that clearly said, "Don't test me." Except this wasn't testing, this was bureaucracy. Somewhere deep in the interspecies HR system, my status had been flagged as non-transferable asset. I didn't even know what that meant, and neither did anyone else, but apparently, it came with social consequences. Coffee breaks became arenas. I reached for my mug, and a hoverchair shot backward as if I had just pointed a laser at it. I tried to smile, shrug, but the reactions were subtle and alarming. Coworkers whispered, some backed away like I had the plague, and a few muttered under their breath words that translated roughly to dangerous and taken. Taken. Me. Apparently, I was the human version of a high-value lab specimen, and the entire research base had just learned about it. I thought maybe it's a prank. Humans love to imagine themselves in office pranks that escalate into chaos. Then HR pinged me a notification with flashing letters. Employee status updated, non-transferable asset. Hands-off policy enforced. Hands off. I blinked. My first thought, well, that's oddly literal. My second, that also explains why no one is touching anything I've touched. My keyboard, my lab notes, even the edge of the table I leaned on had become invisible objects to everyone else. I could feel their fear. Or at least the alien equivalent, tiny tendrils twitching, eyes blinking rapidly, a low hum vibrating from chests that humans would call anxiety. Lunchtime offered no relief. The cafeteria hoverlifts whizzed past me as if I were radioactive. I tried to sit at a table, but two aliens immediately vacated the area, sending my tray skidding slightly. I caught the fruit slice thing on instinct and set it down while muttering sarcastically, "Well, lunch is more exclusive than I imagined." Apparently, exclusive was a strong human word. Around here, words were contracts, and contracts were laws enforced faster than any HR memo I'd ever seen. The alien scientist leaned against a wall nearby, arms crossed, eyes glinting mischievously. She didn't look guilty. In fact, she looked like she knew exactly what she had done and was thoroughly entertained by the aftermath. I tried a casual, "Thanks?" She raised an eyebrow. Her lips twitched. That smirk said, "You've got a lot to learn about property law in the galaxy, human." I started walking down the hall. Normally, I'd nod, joke, maybe pretend to fix a broken drone, but now, every motion felt like a declaration of dominance or ownership. Every glance I gave was analyzed, every hand movement judged. A coworker carrying a stack of lab papers froze mid-step, looked at me, then slowly backed into the nearest door. Even the maintenance drones avoided my path. It was absurd. The human brain, wired for social nuance, now had to adapt to alien literalism. HFY kicked in, sarcasm became strategy. I decided that if I was going to be owned by someone else, I might as well enjoy the perks. By mid-afternoon, the ripple effect was obvious. Meetings halted when she entered. Chairs were pulled back as though I carried invisible radiation. Emails about routine protocol had urgent tags I didn't request. One particularly timid alien whispered to a colleague, "Do not approach the human asset, it is mine." I chuckled. Mine? Right. Everything was mine now, according to alien interpretation. HR had turned an accidental playful bite into a lifetime designation, and nobody had even asked me if I consented. I found a quiet corner, or as quiet as corners could get when everyone else was avoiding you, and sipped my now lukewarm alien juice. I had to admit, there was a thrill in it. Humans adapt fast. When everyone avoids you, you get to watch the chaos unfold like a well-rehearsed play. There was power in subtlety, in sarcasm, in knowing the rules while everyone else panicked. I realized that maybe I didn't even need to fight this. If HR wanted to make me an exclusive asset, I would lean into it, quietly exploiting loopholes, collecting perks, and enjoying the bafflement on alien faces. By the time the sun, or whatever equivalent the research station used, was setting, I had a mental map of avoidance patterns. Lunch schedules, meeting rotations, hallways, coffee stations, all had invisible boundaries enforced purely by fear of violating alien ownership laws. I imagined posting a sign that read, "Do not disturb, non-transferable asset," and laughed aloud. My laughter echoed through the lab, strangely satisfying. The alien scientist caught it and tilted her head. That smirk again. She knew. She knew I was already adapting, already using human cunning to turn her playful bite into a full-blown advantage. And the best part? I was just getting started. Every day would be a comedy of misunderstandings, a delicate dance of sarcasm, adult humor, and subtle power moves. Being owned had its perks, after all. I had priority access, people obeyed my every movement, and nothing mundane went unnoticed, except my dignity, which was already optional in interspecies social politics. I could feel the chaos spreading, coworkers whispering behind doors, glances darting my way, all while I sat in quiet amusement. In retrospect, it was a perfect human moment, a minor accident, a literal-minded alien system, and the application of sarcasm as strategy. The bite was a declaration, yes, but it also became a gateway to absurd authority. And somewhere deep down, I smiled at the thought that while aliens might follow rules with terrifying literalism, humans, especially me, find ways to bend them with humor, wit, and just enough audacity to survive. By the end of the day, I leaned back, held my cup like a trophy, and thought, if being bitten and marked as an asset is this rewarding, I can handle whatever else the universe throws at me. The HR notifications pinged one last time. Asset confirmed. Exclusive rights enforced. And I grinned, realizing that being mine had never felt more human, or more hilarious. The next morning, I realized that surviving the bite was only half the challenge. Navigating alien office politics was an entirely different species of chaos. Every minor action now carried weight. I could type a single email, and an alien assistant would freeze mid-hover, trying to interpret whether the sentence implied consent, claim, or some unspoken territorial rule. Humans have sarcasm as a natural defense. Aliens, apparently, treat it as a form of advanced strategy. That mismatch alone made me feel like a genius, or a very lucky accident. Breakfast was no relief. I approached the hydration dispenser, expecting the usual jostle for space, only to find every alien hovering at a safe distance, muttering about unauthorized contact with a non-transferable asset. I shook my head, muttered under my breath, and poured the glowing liquid anyway. The dispenser hummed as though approving my boldness. I sipped slowly, letting my eyes scan the cafeteria. Alien coworkers whispered phrases that translated roughly to observe protocol or suffer consequences. I realized quickly that being marked as someone's property gave me the social power of a mini-dictator, but without any actual authority. Meetings became ridiculous exercises in caution. When the alien scientist appeared, the room went silent as if she carried an invisible weapon. Everyone else's screens minimized automatically, chairs slid back, and hover pads beeped nervously. I found myself leaning back and smiling, thinking, this is perfect. Humans adapt. This is what humans do. I made a subtle motion toward the agenda papers, and two assistants moved them toward me without a word, treating me like the CEO of some absurdly literal HR nightmare. By mid-morning, I started noticing patterns. Physical space was everything. Every glance, every hand motion, every seat became a negotiation. I waved casually at a coworker, and he jumped back as though I had emitted a warning pulse. I laughed quietly to myself, enjoying the absurdity. Adult humor aside, there was power in being underestimated by everyone else. My sarcasm, my casual expressions, my human oops moments became tactical tools. The alien bureaucracy didn't know whether to follow me, fear me, or take notes. I decided to make them do all three. HR notifications pinged intermittently, each more ridiculous than the last. One alert read, "Employee designated, exclusive use for property interactions. Unauthorized approach prohibited." I blinked. Exclusive use. Unauthorized approach. I imagined a neon sign floating above my head with flashing warnings. I pictured coworkers' faces as they whispered about my newly acquired status. It was the most absurd combination of adult humor, office politics, and interspecies law I had ever encountered. Humans, I reminded myself, would find a loophole. And I did. By mid-afternoon, I had devised a subtle system. Minor gestures became protective signals, coffee cup placement became a boundary marker, and leaning casually against walls became an unspoken "do not cross" command. It was elegant in its simplicity, yet devastatingly effective. Alien coworkers began adjusting their schedules around me. Meetings were rescheduled. Lunch rotations shifted. I even got a seat by the window that no one dared claim. I sipped my juice, enjoying a personal throne. Being mine had perks. Adult perks, office perks, ridiculous perks. Meanwhile, the alien scientist observed quietly, arms crossed, occasionally smirking. It was obvious she enjoyed the chaos, though she never interfered directly. I realized humans and aliens share a universal truth. If you let someone think they have control, they'll take credit, even when the real advantage is entirely yours. I leaned into it, using sarcasm as camouflage and wit as weaponry. Every email I sent, every casual nod, every brief smile was interpreted as a profound command. My human flaw of enjoying mischief became a superpower here. By late afternoon, minor misunderstandings had escalated into full-blown comedy. A coworker approached my workstation, holding a stack of files. Mid-step, he froze, tilted his head, and muttered, "Permission to transfer?" I grinned. "Not today," I said, enjoying the absurdity. The files hovered safely in his hands while he calculated the legal implications of my casual denial. Another assistant hovered near the coffee machine, unsure whether filling my cup would constitute unauthorized contact. I poured my own drink with exaggerated flair. Adult comedy aside, I had learned the most valuable human skill in a non-human environment: improvisation. As the day wore on, my reputation solidified. I became both an asset and a hazard. The office whispered about the human who survived a playful bite and turned it into social dominance. Adult double entendre aside, there was a clear HFY theme. Humans, though smaller, weaker, and hilariously overcomplicated, adapt faster than almost any alien system could anticipate. I smiled at the thought. These aliens had a perfectly literal bureaucracy, yet they were powerless against my improvisation, sarcasm, and casual audacity. By evening, the alien scientist finally spoke, whispered, really, right in my general direction. "Enjoying the perks?" she asked. I sipped my glowing beverage, letting the double meaning hang between us. Yes, I was enjoying the perks, but also no, because navigating alien rules was exhausting in ways humans don't usually anticipate. She smirked again and retreated, leaving the office in silent, careful motion around me. I could feel the tension, the amusement, the fear, all coexisting in a delicate alien ballet. And I realized something wonderful. Humans thrive by finding humor and loopholes where others see rules. The final alert of the day was simple but delicious. Asset confirmed. Exclusive rights enforced indefinitely. I leaned back in my chair, hands behind my head, sipping the last of my juice. Coworkers whispered, shuffled, and carefully avoided my path. Adult double meaning aside, the point was clear: survival, humor, and cleverness had turned an absurd accident into absolute advantage. I was mine. Yes, but in the most human way possible: sarcastic, opportunistic, slightly flustered, and entirely unconcerned with everyone else's panic. By the time I logged off, I had a mental map of avoidance, exploitation, and subtle domination. Human ingenuity had turned what could have been a humiliating bite into a strategic advantage. Adult comedy, double entendre humor, HFY cleverness, all woven seamlessly into survival. And as I exited the lab, watching coworkers jump to the side like I had a force field, I felt a quiet satisfaction. I was human, absurdly so, but remarkably effective. Being mine was only the beginning. The next day, navigating the office had become a game of strategy, endurance, and subtle intimidation. I didn't need to move fast. The rules had already shifted. Every alien colleague gave me a wide berth, hovered nervously, or whispered warnings to anyone who approached. My simple presence created ripples, and I had discovered an unexpected perk. Humans are absurdly good at turning social chaos into advantage. Adult humor aside, it was survival, and I was thriving. Alien social protocols were maddeningly literal. A yawn wasn't just a yawn, it signaled submission. A scratch behind the ear implied curiosity bordering on affection. Even a casual lean on a table was read as a minor territorial claim. I had been marked, yes, but now everything I did was scrutinized for signs of dominance, interest, or, in the most hilarious cases, violation of some obscure interspecies rule. Humans have an uncanny ability to exploit misinterpretation, and I planned to capitalize on every second. I noticed the alien scientist smirking at my subtle adjustments. She clearly enjoyed the confusion she had unleashed. I made a small gesture toward a data pad, nothing more than shifting it an inch. The closest assistant froze mid-hover, hovering exactly 2 meters away while calculating whether my movement constituted permission, threat, or flirtation. I smiled quietly. Every subtle action now carried a double meaning. Adults would call it manipulation. Humans call it improvisation. By mid-morning, the cafeteria had become a minefield. Seats slid away as I approached, trays hovered in the air, and small floating utensils paused mid-flight. A timid coworker murmured, "Do not encroach on the human asset," and I laughed silently. The word asset had never sounded so ridiculous, nor so potent. Every mundane human act, sipping juice, adjusting a chair, scratching my head, became a declaration of status. The adult comedy wasn't hidden, it thrived in every glance, every whispered double-meaning interpretation. Physical comedy became unavoidable. A tray of alien pastries wobbled dangerously near me. I reached to steady it, and the assistant carrying it recoiled, muttering about unauthorized contact. I grinned, letting the gesture linger. Hands off, exclusive, mine. Each movement was exaggerated just enough to provoke reactions without violating HR rules. I sipped my juice, enjoying a moment of quiet triumph. Being marked had turned mundane life into an absurdly theatrical performance. Unexpected problem-solving became my specialty. Every HR notice, every whispered caution, every nervous glance offered opportunities. I discovered that by leaning back in my chair or casually placing my cup, I could establish invisible boundaries. Workspace, coffee machines, hover pads, all became extensions of my human ingenuity. Alien coworkers adjusted their schedules, rotated away from me, and consulted each other before even moving near my desk. I had become a walking, talking, sarcastic strategic advantage. Adult double entendre humor layered itself naturally into this chaos. A coworker approached with a stack of files. Mid-step, they froze, eyes wide. "Permission to transfer?" they whispered. I smiled, holding the files just out of reach. "Not today," I said, letting the phrase hang with multiple implications. Not only was it office sarcasm, but in the human adult sense, it conveyed amusement at being untouchable. Every reaction, every pause, every hesitant glance reinforced the absurd power hierarchy I now inhabited. The alien scientist occasionally wandered near, observing quietly, arms crossed, lips twitching. I knew she was aware of my growing understanding of the rules. It was a silent competition. She had started it with a playful bite. I had escalated it with human cunning. HFY moments became clear. I wasn't stronger, faster, or genetically superior. I was clever. I adapted, exploited loopholes, and embraced humor as a weapon. Sarcasm became strategy, wit became armor, and chaos became my domain. Lunch offered another opportunity. The hoverlift line moved cautiously around me. A small group of aliens hesitated near my table, whispering warnings and muttering about territorial claims and exclusive possession. I leaned casually, flipping a floating utensil between my fingers like a bored juggler. "I suppose the line starts over there?" I said, voice casual, tone ambiguous. They recoiled slightly, unsure whether to obey, question, or laugh. Every human flaw, curiosity, humor, audacity, was now a superpower. As the day progressed, my influence grew without my having to speak much. Gestures, posture, and subtle expressions conveyed more than words ever could. Adult humor lingered in the tension. "Hands off, exclusive. Asset," repeatedly pinged with double meaning, signaling boundaries both professional and personal. Alien colleagues approached cautiously, unsure whether to respect my space, obey protocol, or interpret my glances as flirtation. My sarcasm, subtle and well-timed, amplified every reaction. By late afternoon, rumors had taken root. Whispered warnings of my claimed status spread, creating a combination of fear, awe, and hilarity. The scientist's playful bite had catalyzed an entire office ecosystem. I leaned back, sipping juice, observing coworkers as they tiptoed around me like I carried a weapon no one else could see. Adult double entendre aside, it was absurdly effective. HFY humanity thrived on adaptability. Cleverness, humor, and the ability to bend rules were worth more than strength or alien instinct. Finally, I realized the true reward: control without effort. Every motion, every gesture, every glance elicited reaction. I didn't have to order anyone to move, they did it instinctively. Adult humor lurked in the absurdity. The very traits that made humans laugh, fumble, and flirt had become tools of subtle dominance. Alien bureaucracy, with all its literalism, could not compete with human wit. Every notification ping, every whispered "asset alert," reinforced my position. The day ended with quiet satisfaction. I had become both the human everyone avoided and the one quietly in command. Adult comedy, HFY cleverness, and double-meaning wordplay had merged into a perfect storm. I sipped my last bit of glowing juice, imagining tomorrow's misadventures. Humans excel in chaos. We thrive when others panic, when rules are rigid, and when laughter can be used as leverage. Being mine had been a bite, but mastering it was an entirely human achievement. By the next day, the full impact of the bite had spread like wildfire. Everyone avoided me, and every glance, gesture, or casual move was treated as a declaration of ownership or dominance. Rumors of my claimed status multiplied, each more ridiculous than the last. One assistant muttered that approaching me might constitute a serious protocol violation, while another whispered that my lunch plate alone had become off-limits territory. Adult humor blended seamlessly with chaos. The phrase, "hands off," now carried implications I hadn't even imagined when I got out of bed. I walked through the lab, casually adjusting my floating tablet, and instantly felt the ripple effects. Chairs slid back, small drones hovered nervously, and colleagues whispered warnings in a dozen different languages. Their reactions were exaggerated, ridiculous, and perfectly entertaining. Every tiny human gesture, a scratch behind the ear, a sip of glowing juice, a tilt of the head, was read as a signal. Adult comedy thrived in these misunderstandings. HFY humanity flourished in its ability to adapt, improvise, and exploit misinterpretations with subtle audacity. The alien scientist appeared briefly, arms crossed, a faint smirk curling her lips. She clearly enjoyed the spectacle. I sipped my juice, letting her watch, knowing that my calm demeanor contrasted perfectly with the panic I had inspired. She had bitten me playfully. I had turned it into leverage. I allowed a tiny wink, just enough for the double meaning to hang between us, a signal that I understood her intentions and was fully prepared to exploit them. Adult humor, double entendre, and sarcasm were now my tools, and everyone around me was unwittingly playing along. Lunch was its own comedy show. The hoverlift line rearranged itself spontaneously as I moved through it. Trays hovered in midair, utensils stopped mid-flight, and timid coworkers tiptoed around me. I reached for my drink, and an assistant immediately froze, muttering about unauthorized contact. I held it aloft like a trophy. "Relax," I said, voice casual, tone deliberately ambiguous. The pause, the hesitation, the terrified respect, all of it amplified my presence. Adults would call it manipulation. Humans call it clever survival. HFY thrives on this subtle combination of audacity and wit. By mid-afternoon, I had noticed a fascinating trend. Alien gossip spread like wildfire, exaggerating my actions into absurd legend. Every motion I made was interpreted as a tactical maneuver. Adults in HR might have sighed and rolled their eyes, but here, every glance, every gesture, and every minor inconvenience became a tool. I leaned slightly to the side, just enough for my elbow to hover near the data pad, and immediately, an assistant recalculated every movement. Adult double entendre was embedded in everything. Exclusive asset, hands off, non-transferable. All phrases now carrying layered meanings that I enjoyed thoroughly. Unexpected problem-solving reached its peak. Minor HR alerts pinged, each reinforcing my authority without any effort on my part. Requests to access files, coffee, or even communal drones now required protocol checks. I realized humans excel at bending rigid systems using humor, observation, and sheer audacity. Alien colleagues were genuinely confused, trying to reconcile literal rule-following with my unpredictable human behavior. Adult comedy thrived in these interactions, every whisper and hesitant approach reinforcing my unexpected influence. By late afternoon, I decided to test the limits. I approached a hovering stack of trays, casually flipped one slightly toward myself, and observed reactions. Immediate chaos ensued. Assistants froze mid-hover, small drones altered trajectory, and whispers of non-transferable asset interaction filled the air. I grinned. Being mine had transformed ordinary movements into high-stakes comedy. HFY humanity shines brightest when navigating absurd, rigid systems with wit and sarcasm, and I was in my element. Adult double entendre flourished naturally, as phrases like exclusive rights and hands off gained entirely new dimensions. The alien scientists returned briefly, observing from a distance. I held my juice cup aloft, letting it catch the glow of the lab lights, and smiled subtly. That smirk of hers, half amusement, half admiration, confirmed I had mastered the absurd rules she had accidentally imposed. She had initiated chaos with a bite. I had turned it into structured advantage. Adult comedy blended perfectly with HFY ingenuity. Every small gesture, every glance, every pause was now part of a sophisticated performance. As the day drew to a close, I realized something fundamental: humans adapt. While the aliens followed rigid protocols, I leveraged their literalism to establish a sphere of influence. Adult double entendre humor, asset exclusive, hands off, had become both weapon and shield. Alien colleagues avoided me instinctively, giving me space, resources, and indirect power without my ever issuing a command. HFY triumph was evident: brains, wit, and subtle audacity consistently outmaneuvered rigid systems. By the time I logged off, the office had become a silent comedy stage. Colleagues whispered, hovered, and glanced around nervously whenever I moved. I leaned back, sipping the last of my glowing juice, silently acknowledging the absurdity. Adult humor lingered in every interaction, double meanings layered naturally over bureaucratic chaos. I had survived the bite, exploited the system, and turned panic into advantage. HFY humanity had triumphed again, clever, bold, and unapologetically adaptive. The final HR ping was almost ceremonial. Asset confirmed. Exclusive rights enforced indefinitely. I smiled, quietly savoring the phrase. Adult double entendre aside, the words felt like victory. Human humor, ingenuity, and adaptability had turned what could have been humiliation into comedy, advantage, and control. Coworkers continued to hover, whisper, and avoid, unaware of just how subtly I had turned an absurd accident into structured domination. Walking toward the exit, I imagined tomorrow's chaos. Each step would bring new misunderstandings, every glance would be misinterpreted, and I would continue to thrive. Adult humor, HFY cleverness, and double-meaning wordplay had merged into a complete system. I had become the human everyone avoided and the one who, without force or overt authority, controlled the room. I sipped my juice, smiled, and thought being mine had never felt more ridiculous, more hilarious, or more human.